about Columbus being the biggest winners of this offseason is definitely the signing of Johnny Gaudreau, who at the time no one thought that was even possible. We all thought that Johnny Gaudreau would have possibly signed the New Jersey Devils or Philadelphia Flyers, and even at one point the New York Islanders were in it. And ultimately, he chooses the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, Jeff, what were your thoughts on that? In terms of like the events leading up to that signing.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see how hockey free agency works because it's not like the other sports, and I think of the NBA here, where like a guy like LeBron James gets wined and dined when he's trying to figure out where he wants to spend his career and sign with a team, and teams make these blueprints and bring players in and show them around and things like that, and it's just not that way in the NHL. The free agency period starts, and there's probably some chatter among where players are going to go and things like that. You see deals get announced at 12:01 p.m. when the free agency window starts at 12. So, at the end of the day, there's obviously some sort of, at least sort of understandings as to, what teams are interested in what players and things like that. But it was just interesting to see how the Johnny Gaudreau situation came together because this is a guy who had not even been to Columbus other than to play here. He was in the World Cup of Hockey back in 2016, obviously played here once a year to play against the Blue Jackets. But, it's not like he came here and they laid out a vision and they wined him and dined him and took him out to restaurants and golf courses and all those things where you get a chance to see what the city's all about. And that's just not how NHL free agency works. But he had talked to a number of people around the league as to, places that would be attractive to him, young teams that may have a chance to win in the coming years. I think he did, obviously talked about wanting to be closer to home and, maybe not necessarily New Jersey or Philadelphia, but, somewhere where, the family didn't have to fly all the way across the country to see him. And as he, was looking at a number of places, probably 3-4 places as free agency opened, and the Jackets were looking at, looking at him and other players as well, and signing his teammate Eric Goodbranson out of Calgary. They got to a point in the afternoon on free agency day where it just made sense, I think, for both sides. Certainly for Columbus, you're never going to turn down, one of the best free agents ever, a guy who was second in the league in scoring a year ago. And then for Johnny, he looked at it and, he saw a good young team. He saw a place where he thought, he could win down the road. He saw a place where he heard a lot of good things. One of his best friends is one of the Blue Jackets forwards, Eric Robinson. They grew up together. He played at the World Championships with Zach Werenski and things like that. And just, when he talked to enough people around the game, it seemed like a place he'd be comfortable going. And then, they sit down and hammer out an agreement. So it was certainly a wild free agency day and really maybe something nobody expected going into the day. But once the chips were down and everybody kind of thought about it, it made a lot of sense, I guess, for everybody involved. And now he'll be a Blue Jacket.
We were discussing this when the news broke out that having players like Panarin, Duchesne, Marian Gaborik, Bobrovsky, having those guys at the time were considered superstars. Once they left, there was kind of a hole in terms of having an elite or franchise player on that roster. And now with Johnny Gaudreau coming in, I think it's going to be a good fit not only for him but also for the team in general, especially a player who we all know, Patrick Laine, who we kind of saw struggling in the last couple of seasons, and having a dynamic guy on his line, I think they're going to be a fantastic pairing together.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be kind of I would say $1 million question, but both those guys are getting paid a lot more than $1 million. They're getting paid $9 million, $9 million. So it's going to be the $8 or $9 million question as to how those guys coexist together. Because on paper, it should make sense. You get Patrick Laine here for Columbus, and that was another probably neat trick that the Blue Jackets pulled there to put together a trade where they trade a player that wanted out of town and bring in a guy who's as talented as Patrick Laine on the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal. And so you make that happen. Laine had the first year was a struggle. Last year he actually played pretty well. He was a point a game player. Had some injuries, had the unfortunate passing of his father, but he was he looked much more like Patrick Laine a year ago. But now you put him with Johnny Gaudreau, and you start to think about, Gaudreau is one of the best passers in the game, and he can certainly score some goals. But I think he's 5th or 6th in the NHL in assists the last 5 years. Patrick Laine, one of the top goal scorers in the NHL. He's probably a better assist guy than people give him credit for, but at the end of the day, people talk about goals and they see the shot that he has. And you think you put one of the best distributors of the puck together with one of the best shooters of the puck, and they should go well together. You would think that that'd be a pretty good combination. It'll be interesting to see how their playing styles come together. I think Johnny is one of the best transition players in the game. I think Patty's more of kind of a, cycling, moving through the offensive zone, being in a spot, shooting kind of guy. But we've seen him score some pretty good transition goals as well in his time in Columbus. But it'll be interesting to see how those guys come together, and maybe they work together and play really well. Maybe they end up on separate lines and can kind of anchor those lines. I guess if you're head coach Brad Larson, you've got a lot to play with and a lot of exciting tools at your disposal to kind of see how it all comes together. Same thing with the power play to see how these guys are able to work side by side. But at the end of the day, Johnny Gaudreau, you look at his numbers, he's one of the best players in hockey, really just in every way. He scores points. His teams control the puck. He's great in transition. He's a great defender. His teams have the puck more often than not. At the end of the day, whoever he ends up playing with and however it goes, he's going to make this team better just because of how good of a player he is, not just in the offensive zone, but all the way across the ice.
And we've seen last year, Columbus missed the playoffs, and obviously they struggled a little bit. They had a little bit of issues, not only in net, but I think even just in terms of putting the puck in the net. I think obviously we know what Laine was capable of doing, but I think with Columbus, it was about trying to get another guy to complement Patrick Laine. And I think a lot of us were surprised, when Johnny Gaudreau signs that deal in Columbus. And it was kind of funny because we were live streaming it on the on our YouTube channel, and I actually called Johnny Gaudreau ending up in Columbus, and I kind of said it as a joke, but at the same time it ended up being true. So I mean, it was pretty surprising to see that. But I agree. I think Johnny Gaudreau is one of the best players in the game in terms of transition, kind of like what you said, and I think that he's going to provide a lot of help to a guy like Patrick Laine. I think it's exactly what Patrick Laine needs in his career. And I think, look, Columbus has a really good young talent. I'm a big fan of him, big fan of Cole Sillinger as well. And I think that with Cole Sillinger and Ken Johnson, adding Patrick Laine, adding a guy like Johnny Gaudreau to the mix, and already have a really good decor with Adam Boqvist and Zach Werenski at the back end. I think Columbus is setting themselves up for a future of success here, and I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of excited to see what the future has in store for them, because they really do look like an exciting team for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you look at how you build a Stanley Cup contender, you have to have elite players at the end of the day. Yeah. The secret sauce is having really good players. And you look at a team like Tampa Bay over the last couple of years, they had Victor Hedman, Andrei Vasilevsky, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. I mean, that's probably 5 of the top 20, 25 players over the last, 5 years of NHL hockey, all on the same team. That's how you win championships. You look at, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, together, with Chris Letang have won championships because they're elite players. You go back to the Taves and Kane era of hockey, and the Blackhawks winning, 2 elite players right there. So you need to put together, those really high-end guys that are hard to acquire. And you can argue exactly where Patrick Laine falls in that regard, but this is a guy who can score about as well as anybody in the league. Was a second overall draft pick. He's got 40 goal seasons under his belt. You add, you got Zach Werenski, who, 2-time All-Star, probably just coming into his own now. You see down the road, maybe where guys like Cole Sillinger, Ken Johnson, you feel pretty good about what those guys are going to become. But I think Johnny Gaudreau is the hardest part of the equation. He's another elite player, 115 points last year. You look at it, all the numbers that point to him being one of the best players in the NHL. And that's what I think a team like Columbus needs. You say the hardest part is getting those really high-end guys. And now you've added Johnny Gaudreau, and you feel really good about you've got that part of the equation taken care of. You don't need – you'd love Ken Johnson to become one of those guys in the next 2 to 3 years. You'd love Cole Sillinger to get to that level the next 2 to 3 years. But now you've got a guy who is that level. And it just makes the whole thing it accelerates the rebuild or the reset, is general manager Jarmo Kekalainen has said. It just moves it so far down the pathway to being where you want it to be. And then you think about how young this team is. They've had 5 first-round picks the last 2 years. You've already seen Cole Sillinger and Ken Johnson in the NHL. They've got some other young talent, guys like, Alexander Texier, Adam Boqvist, as you mentioned. Even Zach Werenski and Patrick Laine are not that old. You can sit back and think about 2 to 3 years down the road that this team looks like it's in a pretty good spot to be a contender in that time down the road. So who knows how this first year is going to go. I'm sure you might want to ask, what do you expect the first year? Is this a playoff team? Those types of things. But what they're really looking at is, I think, 2 to 3 years down the road when that window really opens and they really have a chance to be one of the best teams in the NHL at that point.
And, obviously the NHL draft was very exciting. Columbus had 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. What were your thoughts in terms of the selection of David Jiricek and Denton Mateychuk?
Yeah, they've really bolstered the blue line for years to come. And that's one of the situations, one of the positions, I guess, what I meant to say is that they really needed to improve after last year. They were one of the worst teams in the NHL when it comes to the defensive ledger last year. They gave it the most goals in franchise history. And this is not a franchise that this is a franchise that has missed the playoffs more often than not. So if you're the worst defensive team in team history, you've got to get better in that regard. And so, they like Zach Werenski, they like guys like Vladislav Gavrikov, they like the young talent they have back there. They had a good Branson as well, but they've just got to get better there. It's no secret whatsoever. But I think now, they had a pretty good blue line pipeline going forward. Like you say, Boquist is still young. They took Corson Kuhlmans in the draft a year ago in the first round, who I think they believe in what he can be 2 to 3 years down the road. Stanislav Svozil, who's playing at the World Juniors right now for Czechia. Czechia, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I'm Slovak, I should know that.
Yeah, it's Czechia.
But he's a third-round pick they feel very highly about. And so they had some pretty good young defensemen in the system. But you add those first-round picks, and now you feel really, really good about what that blue line is going to look like 3 to 4 years down the road. And Jiricek, 6th overall pick, seeing him here for a development camp just looks like a stud down the road. Has size, but also some offensive ability. And then Mateychuk is a guy, he gets compared a little bit to Cale Makar, which is unfair, but just the style of play. No one's as good as Cale Makar, but he's an offensive guy. He's a swift skater. He's confusing in what he does. He's very he's able to manipulate the puck and be unpredictable. I think they feel really good about now what that blue line is going to look like 2 to 3 years down the road. They feel a lot better about it this year than they did a year ago. Just adding like good Branson and some of the guys getting a little bit older. But as you look at the prospect pipeline, they feel really good about what that looks like going into the future.
Well, I think one of the things too, and you mentioned that Columbus was one of the worst defensive teams in the league last year. I think that a lot of that has to do with goaltending as well. And I know Elvis Merzlikins had a decent year numbers wise. I don't think he was necessarily the problem, but if you go and look at everybody else, Joonas Korpisalo had a really horrible year last year numbers wise as well. 4.5 goals against average, 877 save percentage, and it was kind of interesting, too, because I think this offseason they re-signed Danil Tarazov, who's their young goaltender, to a 3-year deal at $1 million. And so I find that kind of weird that they have 3 goaltenders now pretty much in the system making about $1 million. We know that Korpisalo's got a year left on his deal, and I know that we've also seen rumors that Columbus is willing to move him. Do you think that Columbus ends up moving Korpisalo, and if so, do you think they get much of a return for him? Because clearly, last season wasn't a good year for him at all, and so, I do think that Columbus wants to move on from him. But I would like to know your thoughts, kind of.
Yeah, I would say on the goaltending front, it has to be better than a year ago. And to give it the most goals in franchise history, it was kind of a perfect storm. They were very young, very inexperienced defensively. I think their goaltenders probably would all agree that they probably could have played better. Some of the things were stylistically, they were a more offensive team a year ago than they had been in previous years. But you are right. I mean, the goaltending has to be better. And I think they go into the season thinking, Elvis Merzlikins is your number one. I think they feel he's at a point now where, last year was the first time he had really been an unquestioned number one goaltender. He bore the load. He played 59 games a year ago. I think they feel that he can take that next step now this year and be someone who can carry the mail an entire season and play really well. And then they bring in Korpisalo again on a 1-year deal. They were in the market for a backup. Any backup you're going to sign, there's going to be some question marks there. So they decided to go with the guy that they at least know. I think anything that could have gone wrong a season ago went wrong for Corpy, as they call him here. He was injured. He was sick. He had COVID at one point. It was just anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And so I think they feel like he had off-season for surgery to repair an injured hip. They think he's fully healthy now. That's something that had bothered him the previous even 2 to 3 seasons. I think they think fully healthy with a clean slate, he can be a pretty solid backup. And then they go into the year. Tarasov's kind of an insurance policy at this point, that down the road they view him as a potential number one goalie, but he's only played a handful. I'd have to look it up, but it's only been 20, 25 games in North America. So I think ideally he starts in Cleveland in the AHL level and just gets more and more experience. He played some NHL games last year, and they're really impressed by him, and they think that he's going to be a really good NHL goalie. But I still think he's at that point where he just gains more and more experience. And so you go into the year, Elvis is your one, Corpy's your backup, Tarasov plays in Cleveland. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. Then maybe you have a decision to make about Korpisalo with the trade deadline based on how you're doing, how he's doing. It's a 1-year deal, so what are you going to do there? But down the road, the goalies are Elvis and Tarasov. It's just a matter of how this all shakes out. But this year, they go into the season with that group of three, and they really think that those guys have the potential to be better than they were a season ago. You could argue it's a little bit of a risk, but I think those goalies have also shown they have the talent to do it. And then you just kind of see how everything falls and hope the team plays a little better in front of them. Hope the defense plays a little better in front of them. And then the goaltending will be better and you won't give up as many goals. But it's easy to say that on paper. We'll see how it goes once the season actually begins.
And yeah, well, I was gonna mention, because we mentioned the goaltenders potentially being moved. Do you see any other moves maybe that they could make before the season starts, player wise, or maybe a potential player that you have in mind that could potentially join the team that you'd like to see? Not really necessarily a rumor that's actually like out there, but maybe like a player you'd like to see that they go and get.
Yeah, at this point, I don't see them making any huge moves. I think they've made kind of the trade moves they want to make. They had to send Oliver Bjorkstrand to Seattle on a cap move. They're pretty close to the cap right now. They're in good shape at this exact moment. So any move they would have to make would have to be very cap compliant. They can't really take on any more money. So I don't really see them necessarily making any more trades unless just some sort of opportunity really becomes available to them. I think as you look at how the market is, I mean, there's some really good NHL level players that are out there that haven't been signed yet. We saw Columbus do this 2 years ago with Michael Del Zotto. Brought him on a PTO, and he ended up making the team and being with the team the entire season. So, I could see them kind of kicking around, maybe the center spot. You want to have a little bit more depth. Maybe defensively you look around and say, do we want to just bring in another veteran just in case, this is a player that can help us down the road and provide a little bit of leadership. I think those are the types of moves that they could still see themselves making. So I don't see anything earth-shattering, but I think there's still just enough good players out there that you never know. I think they need more center depth. I think they feel good about the four that they have going into the season, but just someone gets hurt, I think you maybe want a little bit more there. I think you can never have enough defensemen, and so it wouldn't surprise me to see maybe a move on that realm. But by and large, I think this is going to be the team that they have going into the upcoming season at this point.
Well. Chris, you want to ask I know you're going to ask the question, so you might as well just ask it now.
No, I was actually concerning, the center depth,
okay.
Jenner's experience. Yeah, we're going to wait on that. Boone Jenner obviously has the experience. It seems like he's going to be the first line center this year. You have Jack Roslovich, still relatively young. Cole Sillinger, young. Sean Corrali, young. So, in terms of like trying to get maybe leadership or someone that's experienced, I mean, I think it would be a no-brainer to try to like sign Paul Stastny to a contract.
Yeah, and I think you say the problem might be the cap, and I don't know what he would require. I would say, I guess if you're at this point, there's probably not a lot of guys that are going to command big money out there. But I think you can make an argument that you maybe do want to be a little bit older there. As you said, they don't really have anyone over the age of 30 at the center position. And they're really young in a case of like a guy like Cole Sillinger. And then especially you say if you get hurt, they really don't have someone that can slide over and really be a dependable guy there. Justin Danforth did it a little bit last year, but he's a little bit more of a veteran guy, but he's a bottom six center really at that point. And so, if you lose the Jenner and you lose Roslovic, you hate to talk about injuries, but it can happen. I can see where you would want more depth there. Like I say, and they maybe don't necessarily have a number one out of that group, a traditional number one yet. I think Jack Roslovic's young and is getting better. Cole Sillinger might be there at some point down the road, maybe not too far down the road, but is he there at 19 years old? And that's the one spot I think where you could probably use more depth and use a little bit more veteran nature and use a more of a dependable guy just because you can get yourself into injury trouble. But whether or not they're going to make a move like that, it'd have to fit in the cap. It'd have to be the right guy because I know they like their chemistry as well. But you can certainly sit there and look at what they have and say, it would make sense to maybe make some sort of move along those lines to just add some depth there and add, just so you don't get caught in a situation where you're just down a guy. So I can definitely see what you're saying. I guess time will tell how that goes. But like I say, there's enough good NHL players out there that I can see that something like that happening.
Lucas, should I say the follow-up question since I'm always asking the same question?
I'll let you say it because I was going to ask it, but you say it because
okay, I'll say it. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of questions concerning PK Subban's status. Obviously, he's still not signed yet. You're saying, maybe they have to improve defense, but two names that come to mind apart, obviously PK Subban being one, but the other would be Calvin DeHaan, two guys that are experienced and maybe could help shape that, defensive core since he's relatively young. What are your thoughts on maybe those two players signing a contract with the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, like I said, you can never have enough defensemen. So you say they did it a couple years ago with Michael Del Zotto. I think they generally like their defensive core right now. I think they feel they have 7 to 9 guys they can play on a regular basis and not feel like they're really down. But you can always add more talent. You can always add more guys. The thing I'd say, and I love PK Subban. The only I just would worry from a chemistry standpoint, just because he's such a big personality. I think they really have a lot of big personalities already on this team with guys like Patrick Laine and Elvis Merzlikins. I don't know that they necessarily want to add another. And it's just good, bad, or indifferent. I think it's just a matter of fit. But I like I've always been a big PK Subban fan, but I think they might be a little reticent to just rock the boat too much. If I could see them making a signing, I just don't see them going too far down a road where they're just adding people to add people. But you never know. Like I say, you can never have enough defensemen. You can never have enough depth there. They're still pretty young there as far as NHL games played. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they go down a road with something like that. I guess it all comes down to what Jarmo Kekalainen believes and what they could fit, at a certain point. But like I say, they don't have a ton of cap room. So whatever they do, it's going to have to be the right guy at the right price. But we'll see how it goes. I didn't think they'd sign Michael Del Zotto a couple years ago, and they did. So I guess you just never know how things are going to work out. But we'll have to see something to monitor and see how that goes.
Yeah. So Jeff, just the reason why we were laughing about the question is just because he's asked that question to every single guest that's come on.
I figured.
So we're as you can tell, we're from Montreal, so we're big Subban fans as well. So we want to see him potentially play in the NHL. But just moving on to just a little bit more in terms of Columbus. I'm a huge fan of Cole Sillinger. Like, I watched him play a little bit this year. Got fortunate, obviously watched a bit in the games that he played against the Habs too a little bit, and I was very, very impressed with him as a player. I think he's a guy that Columbus has themselves a potential second line center there in him. And with Kent Johnson, we've already seen what he's capable of doing at the international level. We've seen him at the World Juniors. And obviously we saw him at the Olympics too. I think that those two guys especially are just going to bolster their forward core a little bit more. And I'm like I said, I'm a big believer in Columbus's future, but I just want to know, you've seen Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger firsthand. What do you think in terms of just their projection? Do you think that these guys are two guys that are going to be the future of Columbus's top six, or you think that's a bit too early to tell, just in your opinion?
I definitely think they will be, as far as that goes. Cole Sillinger, what an incredible season he had. 18 years old. He was the youngest player in the NHL the entire season, and he stuck the whole year. I think I looked it up, and at the end of the year, there was only 3 players from the 2021 draft who played more than 10 games in the NHL last year. And Cole was the only one that played. Cole played like 70 something. There was I'm drawing a blank. I think it was for the Kings. There was a defenseman that played 50, or no, it was Anaheim. One of their defensemen played like 50. And then that was the only guys that played more than like 20. So Cole Sillinger had an incredible season a season ago to stick with the Blue Jackets all season. There were some ups and downs, as there's going to be with an 18-year-old, but he showed this kid was born to play hockey. He's going to be, at worst, a very good second line center in the NHL, I think. Does it all, just responsible defensively, plays a team game, is going to be a strong guy, strong on faceoffs, things like that. Has some offensive skill to him. Had 16 goals last year at 18 years old. Cole Sillinger is just going to be a plug and play guy for years. Kent Johnson will be the fascinating one, just because he's a 5th overall pick. He's been on all these Team Canada teams, playing at the World Juniors right now. Has shown at lower levels just the skill to do things that not many people in the NHL can do. You talk to scouts and they rave about what he can do at a high level of speed. Like, he doesn't have to slow down to make incredible plays happen. He can do them at top speed, and that's the biggest thing you want to see out of a talented player as you project him to the NHL level. But at the same time, he's a beanpole. He's 6 foot, 160 pounds at this point. He's going to have to get stronger probably to really excel at the NHL level. And so the future's out as to whether he'll be a center or a wing. I think he's a top 6 player no matter what down the road. The biggest question for him is going to be where he plays. But just seeing him, scouting him in some of these other games and some of the junior games and things like that. There's everyone you talk to has very high hopes about the future of what Kent Johnson's going to be.
And in terms of a breakout player this upcoming season, is there anyone in mind when you think about heading to the season, a very young team, obviously with the addition of Gaudreau, being at the focal piece, heading into the season on offense. Is there anyone in mind that maybe may like benefit off Gaudreau? Like for example, my pick would obviously be Laine. I think he would have a breakout season. If maybe you guys have any suggestions in terms of like who you guys have as a breakout player heading into the season?
Yeah, I'd stick with like looking at some of the younger players. Alexander Texier, who was a second-round pick a couple years ago, was on the 2019 playoff team that beat Tampa. Actually scored 2 goals in the game 4 that they beat Tampa to win that series. He was maybe their best forward the first half of last year. Had 20 goals and 20 points in 30-some games. Really turned it on as the season went on, and then suffered a broken finger. And then had some issues. Had to take a personal leave with some issues with his family, I believe, and ended up not playing the second half of the season, but he's ready to maybe be a guy, a real good second, third line player in the NHL that you're going to hear a lot about down the road. And then 2 Russian players. Yegor Chinikov was a rookie last year. He was the shocked first round pick back in 2020. Loads of skill. Once he figures it out at the NHL level, he's going to be really fun to watch. And then Kirill Marchenko played in St. Petersburg last year, was a second round pick back in 2018. They've been waiting for this guy to come over. Just pure skill is going to be a guy that's going to score a lot of goals in the NHL. He's going to come over and be a rookie this year after finishing up in St. Petersburg. If one of those guys sticks with the team and really clicks with somebody, those guys could put up some points at the NHL level because they're young and skilled, and it's just a matter of when it happens, I think, with those guys.
I would absolutely love to see Cole Sillinger play with alongside Laine and Gaudreau. I feel like that would be absolutely fantastic. I think Cole Sillinger, I like I said, I watched him play a little bit last year. I think he would complement both those guys really, really well. And obviously, we talk about defensive game, maybe not the best defensive line in the league in terms of the fact that Gaudreau and Laine aren't the best defensively, but adding a guy like Cole Sillinger, I think just to bolster his offensive production a little bit more, I think having 2 guys like that on his wing would be really cool. And again, Jack Roslovic, I think, is another one that makes a lot of sense as well because, he's played with Laine in Winnipeg before. They've had good chemistry together. And I think if you add a guy like Gaudreau to that line, that could be one of the best lines in the NHL this season to come. So I'm excited to see maybe those 2 guys potentially, sit next to Gaudreau and Laine for sure and potentially get some points. I don't know about Chris, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to mention Jack Roslovic too. I think he's going to have a 60-point year this year, especially with Johnny Gaudreau being added. And if all 3 of them are going to be playing together, I mean, it's going to be an insane lineup. And, I think I like him. He's one of my favorite players on the Columbus Blue Jackets. I've been very high on him. I never understood why Winnipeg gave him up. With Patty Laine, Columbus completely fleeced them on that one, especially now that Dubois wants to leave. But I never understood why they gave up a player like that. And he could also, I mean, he's a center, but he could also play wing. So like he's very versatile and kind of like JT Miller.
And just to add to that, like for me, I was seeing like Patrick Laine. I think would benefit the most from like Johnny Gaudreau, because it's the first time since his days in Winnipeg where he's playing with a dynamic, elite, or maybe some people may even consider him a franchise player at this point since he's the biggest star on Columbus. So I think that would be my pick. But having Marchenko, Robinson, Laine, Texier, that made essentially Bjorkstrand expendable, and that's why I see the reasoning behind why they traded him. And I think the rumors were circulating that it was between him or Nyquist to be traded in terms of trying to clear cap space to sign Patrick Laine. So I know a lot of people were kind of like upset about that because at one point they were saying that Bjorkstrand was our best player the last couple of seasons. When we didn't have anybody to step up, he stepped up, and unfortunately, we had to part ways with him. And people were really underwhelmed with the value that they got in return for him.
Just a quick question here, because we know that you're cut up, you're a little time constraint at the moment. But just in terms of that, just your final thoughts in terms of looking at the Metro Division, kind of where everything's at. Do you think that Columbus have the pieces necessary to make the playoffs this year, or do you think that there's still maybe 1, 2, 3 years off after the acquisition that they made?
Yeah, the East is tough. There's no doubt about it. I mean, every team that made the playoffs last year in the Eastern Conference had over 100 points. The Blue Jackets finished 10th in the East, and they had 81. So you got to make up 19 points somewhere, whether it be a team, coming down or you going up. So are they 19 points better than they were a season ago? That's a pretty big question. That's a lot of points to make up. I like the makeup of this team, and if everything clicks together, I could see them being a playoff team. But man, there's such tough competition there that I'm not going to put my life savings on it. That's for sure. Would I be surprised? I would not. Would I be surprised if they take some time to figure all this out? I would not be surprised about that either. So I'm not going to sit here and guarantee playoffs. I'm pretty excited to see what this team is going to be 2 to 3 years down the road. Maybe more so than this upcoming season. If you're a Jackets fan, you should still be really excited to watch Johnny Gaudreau and these young players. But I think the real fruits of the labor come down the road. So I'm 50-50 on the playoffs. I just think with how tough the East is and things like that and how young you still are. But would it surprise me? Absolutely not. And it's going to be a fun season, though. That's for sure. The enthusiasm in Columbus is really high. The excitement's really high. It should be fun to see how this group starts to come together and starts building for what they should be doing here down the road. So,
Yeah, they have a young, promising team, and if everything clicks together, anything is possible at that point. But Jeff, we just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much for coming on. Being able to cover the Columbus Blue Jackets, especially after such an active off season. You covered the team essentially, so having to hear what you have to say, it means a lot to us, and I think it means a lot to our viewers as well, especially the Columbus Blue Jacket fans. So I just wanted to wish you, on behalf of the Young Guns podcast, a very good season this year, and hopefully they do make the playoffs, or at least we see a lot of progress in terms of where the team goes in the near future.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.